Okay, so this is a photo of some beach sand from Hawaii, and I think we all know this is not what sand is supposed to look like. So I'm going to tell you a little bit today about plastic debris in the ocean, and the outcome or the goal today is just to give you 3 practical problems with plastic pollution in the ocean, rather than just some vague sense that this is bad and not right. So, people have been talking about plastic accumulating in the ocean for 20 years or so now. And I think for the most part, because most of the ocean is this very remote place that most people never visit, the attention for this problem has kind of waxed and waned over the years. But attention really picked up recently during this big search for the Malaysian airliner that crashed in the Indian Ocean. So there's this interesting story in National Geographic where you all probably remember this. There was like a period of 2 weeks where they were desperately searching for any sign of airplane debris in the ocean to figure out what happened here. And one of the problems was that they were finding a lot of debris, but it wasn't pieces of airplane. It was just typical consumer plastic. It kind of brought plastic pollution to the international consciousness a little bit. So I think we're all familiar that plastic is an omnipresent force in our lives. But just to give you some idea of some scale, the plastic production every year is something like 300 million tons. So that means for each person on Earth, about 90 pounds of plastic is made every year. If you make the same calculation for plastic production in the US and the US population, it's more like 200 pounds per person. So for most of us, that's more than our weight of plastic is made each year. And it's all mostly just being put out into the environment. We do recycle, but technology is not at a state where we can have a very high percentage of recycling. So we're just putting all this stuff out there. It stays around for a long time. So what's going to happen to it? A lot of it ends up in the ocean. So what are the pathways for plastic to get into the ocean? Believe it or not, one of the biggest one just is shipping. So all of today's goods travel around the world on the ocean, mostly on these container ships. And there's an interesting anecdote. In 1990, there was a storm that hit one of these container ships and spilled 60,000 Nike sneakers out into the North Pacific Ocean. And it was really interesting that these shoes started washing up on shore in places where we could sort of predict they might, based on the surface currents. So here, pretty quickly, some shoes ended up on the west coast of the US. They even found it in Hawaii, and this points out all of the subtropical oceans have this big gyre circulation. So typically plastic debris will get swept into these gyres and it can kind of accumulate there and stay there for a long time. And if you've ever heard the term the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, it's this area they're referring to where a lot of plastic is accumulated more than other areas. Other pathways, aside from shipping, are just typically runoff from land in our landfills. In particular, lightweight plastics that can be carried by wind and rivers and streams. Like you've probably all seen something like this with a shopping bag stuck in a tree. So plastic is just so present in the environment. It's just a lot gets lost. It floats in the surface ocean and gets caught up in these gyres. So, this plastic is getting into the ocean. Why do we care about that? Do you guys have any guesses? I'm going to go through the 3 major ones.
Animals can eat it, or
Yeah. So, congestion. Anything else?
It can break down and I guess affect all different levels of the food chain, and we can ultimately end up getting it inside ourselves.
Yeah, that's a good point. Because plastic doesn't break down that easily chemically, but it breaks down physically into microparticles. So yeah, further along the line, it could be getting even back into our water sources. That's not one of the main ones I'm going to talk about, but that's a good point. How about one from you?
Is any effective will be covering those to prevent some photosynthesis?
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, but clearly it can have a lot of ecological impacts. So the first one isn't so much about ecology, but it's just aesthetics. So this is a beach in Hawaii where that picture of the sand came from the first slide. So Hawaii sits right at the edge of this big gyre. So this beach is right on the southern island of Hawaii. And, unfortunately, they're getting all this plastic washing up on shore. This is not pollution from their local areas. It's just coming from all over the world. And, this has a cultural impact of not wanting to be at the beach, and also has economic impacts. People are less likely to visit here and spend money. Second one is ingestion. This is the most graphic picture, so I'll just make that disappear. But yeah, so animals mistake these particles for food, and they can't break them down. They don't get any nutrition out of it. The other problem is that plastic kind of acts as a sponge for all these bad organic pollutants like PCBs and EPA you may have heard from, so they kind of have this toxic effect as well. The last one is entanglement. So when I was growing up, we always talked about cutting up our Coke bottle rings. We talked about entanglement then. We don't talk about it so much now. But so in the ocean, a big problem is fishing nets. So fishermen will lose nets over the side, and they can entangle animals. And sometimes it's for a long time, and you get these really gnarly things that have ecological impacts, obviously. The animals get caught up. But it also has an economic impact in that when you have this ghost fishing happening, too many fish are being caught by these ghost nets that nobody wants. There's less fish for the fishermen to get, so we have less fish production in the ocean. So, to summarize, 3 practical problems society faces for plastic pollution is aesthetics, ingestion, entanglement. There's other interesting things like microplastics and potentially impact on phytoplankton. That was an interesting point. So what things can we do to make this problem better? There's 3 avenues. We don't have time to go into them, but essentially we have the power to make legal agreements, and the shipping industry is actually starting to do this, where ships can no longer put any plastic over the side in their garbage. They have to wait till they get back on shore. Technology will improve our recycling and our ability to just reduce the amount that we lose by wind and runoff and things like that. And also education, just to have people be a little more conscious of the way they're using plastics. Maybe can reduce some of the production. We really need all these single-use bags or not. So if you're interested in some further reading, this book came out 2 or 3 years ago. It's written by a sea captain who was one of the first people to report finding plastic in the North Pacific Ocean. And he worked with a science writer to produce this book that goes through a lot of problems and some potential solutions. That's all I have.